Hey everyone! Today is part 2 of figuring out the new vector algorithm in Moontrader. Last time I've broken down the basic mechanism it uses to search for patterns. Today we'll look at what the algorithm does once a pattern is found. If you haven't seen the previous video, number 72, I suggest you watch that one first, as things here will make more sense when you're familiar with the basics. In this one, we'll look at the order part of the algorithm parameters. For today's purposes, I'm going to use a pretty wild algorithm parameter setup, which in no way reflects what a real-life setup should look like. Last time, I shared my view of what makes trades more likely and less likely with the vector. Well, today, for the sake of convenience, I'll be using a setup which makes trades pretty much inevitable, so that I don't have to wait for hours and hours for an order to emerge. First of all, the starter algo has no filters whatsoever, and it will be on the buy side. Secondly, we'll be looking for a minimum viable pattern within 2 short frames. Therefore, the time frame is 0.3 seconds and the frame size is 0.15 seconds. The spread we'll be looking for is very small, at 0.15%. No limits on border ranges, and a minimum of 2 trades, and also a minimum of 1 USDT in quoted asset volume. This should generate a lot of pattern triggers. The settings pertaining to the order have been, for starters, left at their defaults. The only thing I've changed so far is the order size. I set it low with enforced exchange minimum order size. The reason I do it this way is that I found the emulation for vector to be way too far removed from reality when it comes specifically to executing orders. In my experience, emulation here is only useful for watching the frames being drawn. Let's get a few orders like this and try to figure out what they mean. Here's the first one. We've got 2 frames in a row. The first one is 0.22% and the second one is 0.19%. Both are greater than 0.15, so an order is triggered. We know it is a buy order, but where exactly is it placed? The setting says 5%, but here's the catch. This is not 5% of the price, but it is 5% of the spread size. So, it being 0.15% of the price, take another 5% off of that, and you get 0.0075% of the price. Right. But where is it measured from? The manual says that for buy orders, it is measured from the lower end of the frame height. Also, a positive value places the order that much into the frame. Looks right. The order is just a tiny bit inside the frame. Leaving this sorry excuse for a take profit aside for now, let's see how we can adjust the order distance. I assume that if I were to put in minus 100%, I'd get an order placed outside the frame at a distance equal to the frame height. This should be quite an easy way to verify that I understand this correctly. Actually, I wonder whether it is going to be the spread size from the settings, which is 0.15, or the real height of the actual live frame. So let's see. Alright, we've got this order. Actually, 2 of them. Let's figure out what happened. The first order does seem to be outside the frame, but super close to the actual lower frame border. And it appears to have been placed even before the frame itself had ended. So, from what I see here, as soon as the ongoing frame height exceeds the spread size, the order is placed. Kinda makes sense. Why wait for the frame to end when the pattern already exists? And to verify, the frame started with the price going straight down. So right in the middle of the frame, As the price was passing the 0.15% level, the order was placed another 0.15% lower than that. Very clear. Now, here we also have a second order, which is way lower. Let's figure that one out. And by the way, why do we have a second order at all? Back to the algo parameters. Here it says max orders equals 3. I've got only 2, but we'll deal with that later. Now, here it says order frequency is 0.1 seconds. So apparently, that's the timing delay between each consecutive order. Looking at the graph, it is true. That second one appeared just a tiny bit later. And that explains why it is so far down. Within that extra 0.1 second delay, the price moved further down, stretching the height of the real-life frame to its maximum of 0.27%. And therefore, the second order was placed exactly 0.27% below the lowest point of the frame at that time. Again, very clear, at least with the evidence I have so far. As you can see, both orders were cancelled pretty quickly. This is governed by the order lifetime setting here. Both lasted exactly 1 second. Now, why did I not get a third order? My first intuition is that the frame size of 0.15 seconds is way too small to fit in all 3 orders, each 0.1 seconds apart. By the time the third order was supposed to be placed, the frame had ended, and so had the pattern. Let's test this by stretching the frame size to 0.3 seconds and the time frame to 0.6. Okay, with this, I do manage to get 3 orders, provided that the order placement starts early enough in the frame, or if the pattern continues into the third frame. If the pattern emerges very late in the frame and does not persist, you don't get the full 3 orders. So, in my view, the purpose of the order is to enter a trade on the margins of the pattern and take a profit as the price bounces back towards the middle point of the pattern. And the purpose of having multiple orders, I guess, is to continuously and often feed off of the same pattern, or maybe produce some sort of a quick grid. I mean, the first time I read the description of the algo, I immediately imagined something like this. Here we have a bitter fight between buyers and sellers, and the order book density near where the ask and the bid sides of the order book meet is quite low. It would be hard to catch these with shots in a controlled manner, but with vector, that will be one of the prime use cases, in my opinion. This is an example right at the point of listing of a new coin. The spreads are 4%, then 2%, then 3%. Unfortunately, in this case, by the time I set up the algo, these wild spread sizes toned way down. Back to the settings. Let's take a closer look at order lifetime. Should be pretty self-explanatory. That's how long the order waits around until being cancelled. A big difference from shots is that the order never moves. It just sits there exactly where it was first placed. So obviously, the longer the order lifetime, the higher the chances are of it being filled. But also, the longer it sits there, the farther away it is from the pattern that brought it about in the first place. Let's say you're looking for patterns within 1 second, but then have your orders live for 10 seconds. Well, in 10 seconds, the pattern is long gone and your order is a sitting duck. Here's an example with a 10-second lifetime setting. The order for the final trade was triggered here and filled 9 seconds later. In between those points, so much had happened that the original placement of that order really had nothing at all to do with the situation that emerged 9 seconds later. This will especially be the case if you choose a large negative order distance that puts the order outside the pattern itself. The default setting places the order slightly inside the pattern, and I guess this was more the intended way to trade. Also, I imagine that the intended way assumes the order lifetime that is closely correlated with the time frame. Here's one more example of unsafe settings with long order lifetimes. A complete, uncontrollable mess, if you ask me. I'm using those extreme settings for now because this way it is easier to demonstrate and figure out how things work. The last thing in the order settings is this checkbox. The manual says it makes a difference when the price is moving in the same direction across frames. So this is more of a tweak than the main course. I tried to understand it, but for now, it seems a bit early for me. My understanding of the whole thing has not evolved enough to clearly explain this to you. What proves that it is all way too early is this footage. At times, my test algo was being completely obliterated by this coin. And at other times, it was on an amazing winning streak. And the crucial thing is, I'm still not entirely sure why. So for today, I'm content with clearing up what triggers order placement, how to adjust order distance, what this distance is measured from, what determines the number of orders, how often they appear, and how long they stay alive. The rest of the things we'll figure out in the next video.